It's 5 o'clock in the morning right now, so I am not talky yet. I feel a little naughty at this time, but the funny thing is when we started the podcast, I was starting at 5 a.m. anyway, so this would be normal for the podcast as it existed for several weeks. But just being on my own, I feel like, I'm supposed to get sleep, and it's like, well, wait, I don't really have any responsibilities tomorrow. This is my time down here. And this is my life. This is what I do. If I feel like making a video in the middle of the night or the middle of the morning, that's my gosh darn right as an American. Now, the rationale here is I've been advancing in my dream work, recovering ground that I've crossed before, but I haven't been here in a hot minute, and so I'm waking up quite a bit throughout the night to write down dream content in a journal. I feel like that's a good transitory step until you have better recall. It helps you to sort of dig back into the dream and get more and more content. But one of the problems which can occur for me is that in that hypnagogic state where you're not really focused on your world around you and your life, and you're not task oriented, you're not paying attention to someone or some song or some video, you're just there alone with your thoughts, you actually have some pretty intelligent thoughts, some things that you're like, wow, I should write that down. And this is sort of like my meditation and thought purging video. Same thing can happen in the early stages of meditation. You just get flooded with these ideas that seem like smarter than your normal ideas. And so it's like, well, I know the whole point is to sleep or to meditate, and in either case to not think verbal content and problem solve. But your brain is weirdly good at that when it's not supposed to be, and weirdly bad at it when it really is supposed to be. This is my thought purging. I don't know if you can see that, but so as I'm dream journaling and I'm having these hypnagogic states, and there's just this flood of thoughts, and I say, okay, well, I'll just remember all this and I'll make a video at some point about it. But I don't really do that because in my normal waking life, I'm not in the sort of attitude that I'm in right now. Actually, it is that hypnagogic state. It is alpha brainwaves with even a little bit of theta. So through the dream work, I'm doing this thought purging now. I just decided I'm going to maybe this will help. And I feel like the thoughts just keep coming. So I said today, what if I just do a freaking talk right now and get some of this stuff out, like in real life? Like, because I'm going to edit this video, and at some point I'm probably going to watch it again. And so it's sort of like a real journal, like something that's going to stick with me. It'll help me to gain clarity and cohesiveness in my own internal narrative, how it changes over time or how it changes throughout the day as my brainwaves change. So I wanted to tell a little story that I think is kind of significant concerning the things that I plan to discuss next. When I started Unthink Me, just even based on the name, I didn't really want it to be a personal thing about the Adam Lowen history story. And I'm also, I know I have a lot of important people in my life who I'm concerned, with their privacy. And so I'm always like I'll change people's name if I don't think they would ever appear on the show, or if they're not interested or invested in it, or they'd be critical of it, or just I want to be respectful of everyone. But me personally, I can share anything with the world at this point. I have no remaining capacity for shame, or nothing really embarrasses me deeply. I have a really positive view of myself, and I feel like whenever I put myself out there emotionally, vulnerably, intellectually, I do get kickback, I do get criticism, but I feel that in retrospect, when I look back at those things, those are the correct thing for me to do in terms of my values. And Did I make the right choices? That I am approve of me not holding myself back, which is the theme of the last year of my life. So this is very on brand, while not being particularly on the Unthink Me brand. So basically, that's got to change. At this point, having done a lot of the podcast and having really explored and outlined the ideas that I want to do moving forward, it occurs to me that I really do have to get pretty darn personal with my audience for the sake of comprehensibility. So my mother died on my 18th birthday. And this, of course, begs the question, are they related? No, not particularly. I think one fair thing that we could all say about it is that it was an accident. Now, a big beef I have is, when someone close to you dies and you're surviving that and everyone else is surviving that, the person who died has no opportunity to represent their own position. We don't get to know what really happened, why it happened, what it means, where they were going, where they thought they were going, where they were really going. And so everyone kind of walks away from that with a ego justifying script. And I'm as guilty as the next member of my family or, friend who survived her. But she can't ever do that. That's the nature of being dead. So I'm going to tell a very brief version, a very limited version of that story so that I did that. And because it will play a role in a lot of the sorts of things we talk about later, particularly concerning romantic relationships. Why my 18th birthday? Again, there's no relation, not really. On the night of my 18th birthday, you can imagine I'm an 18-year-old boy. I went and bought all the cigarettes and threw some money in gambling machines and ended up at Finnegan's Family Restaurant. At Finnegan's, I had a lovely, wonderful night. Ended up drinking lots of coffee, staying late. There was this girl, Lindsay, a Lindsay that was somewhat significant to me in that she had asked me to the prom, and I turned her down because I had a girlfriend. And then I didn't take my girlfriend to the prom because I was a douchebag. And that's probably why that particular girlfriend dumped me. But we had an awesome night, and we were interacting with these women and, feeling very 18 years old, long story short. Apparently during the time that I was out there, before I came home, my mother had driven into town to see me on my birthday. This was somewhat uncommon, but not terribly uncommon. Josephine lived in a school bus for the last year of my life. There was just a day where she wasn't home anymore, and I eventually detectived out that she had moved out of my house. And luckily, it wasn't her house or my house. It was my grandmother's property. And so my grandmother was able to move in, and then nothing had to be done about us kids. So Mom went off to live in a bus, and this was kind of on a trajectory that she had been on for a while. I think a good way of thinking of it is that she felt herself to be in a series of codependent relationships and somewhat toxic relationships from her perspective. One of those being her relationship with her mother, where her mother owned the house that she lived in, which my father built. My father at this point was not in the picture, particularly. He was around. But so she moved out of my house and was not homeless, but living with very homeless kind of people. People with they talked like they were mentally handicapped or had social problems. They were the kind of people you would see at a bus stop or the regulars at a bar. And these were sort of the people in her life. She considered them the salt of the earth, She was very into the book Cannery Row by Steinbeck. And kind of romanticized the simple people of the world. This was a very huge move in that direction. From my perspective, I would say that she had increased her issues with binge drinking and perhaps other drugs. Again, from my perspective, I didn't see that she really had a terrible problem with any of that, but she did use cannabis a good amount, and she would have problematic binge drinking episodes, which were somewhat infrequent. They would occur in spurts. Now, growing up, I had no awareness of, as most kids don't, I had no awareness of mental illness, how to classify that, addiction. We just kind of recognized that she had mood swings, like pretty wild mood swings. We'd call her a crazy bitch a lot, and she would scream and slam doors. One time she decked me in the face while driving, and being 16 or something, I just knocked her right back. So we popped each other in the face. We were very, very close. She was quite a good mother in the sense of mothering, nurturing, caring, helping to guide me, and trying to help with my self-esteem and things like that. As far as practical matters, our childhood was rather messy and rather low class. We were often very poor, and she did the best that she could for us, but like money was really scarce. And so I didn't really know where this could lead. A lot of people in retrospect are identifying it that she had bipolar, but she was never diagnosed as such. I think that she matches the patterns pretty well, but I personally did not witness her ever being fully manic. So maybe bipolar 2, maybe just major depression. I'm also not a real psychiatrist, so I don't know the finer points of diagnosing, and also they have changed quite a bit over the years since then. But it was not as much in the lexicon then. This wasn't a thing that people talked about quite as much. So we knew something was wrong, but I don't think anyone really recognized it as mental illness. And there was a real failure of support for her, positive support. The kind of support that was offered was very kind of controlling, and that was what she was reacting against. She ended up living out in this bus with these kind of seedy enablers, in my opinion. And she had this habit. She would always bring her Dalmatian, which was originally my Dalmatian, but I didn't really take care of it properly. So it was with her. She had 2 dogs, somebody else's dog that she had rescued when he went to prison. That's a pretty funny story, but I don't want to go too deep into all that. So she had these 2 dogs, and she lived in this bus in the winter, dead of winter, Montana, with bales of hay under it and a small heater in there. And I'd gone out several times and drank moonshine and smoked weed, had a lovely time kind of trying to, I guess, bury the hatchet. It wasn't like we had fought or anything, but there was still some hard feelings about her, like moving out of my house and me not really understanding what was going on. And so she had come, like one time she came by my place, and I slept out on a deck with like screen windows, because I for a long time I slept in a tent outside my house. I also slept in a closet with no bed. I was a weird kid in terms of how I slept, at least. But she came out there, and I was like surprised to see her, and she had this huge gash across her elbow, which was just like one night she got drunk and like fell over a fence, and it gored her arm, and she didn't get stitches, and so permanent like disfigured elbow. So just as an example of kind of reckless, like risky behaviors that were becoming pretty noticeable. But she came out there, and I even have a picture where she just kind of climbed into bed next to me and just held me. And it was a really beautiful moment for both of us. And one of the kind of last moments that I really had as like a real moment with her. So I'm assuming that something like that was kind of what she had in mind when she came to visit me on my 18th birthday. And she was with another guy, but he was just sort of some drunk, from the bar over there. Might have been a nice guy, might have been a terrible person, who knows. And I wasn't there, and she had kind of fought with my grandmother. This is the honey, that's that grandmother. And then she took off and went back to her home, which was perhaps 45 minutes out of town. This is where I was going. She she had this habit. She would drive her truck, the big green F-150. I loved that vehicle. She would drive it with no fuel in the tank, like practically none, like all the time, like below the empty line. And she felt this real confidence that it would never run out because she knew right where it would run out. Well, on this night, it ran out. And so she and her, this man that she was with, they left, I'm assuming they left the dogs in the car, or perhaps the dogs came with them. But they made it to a little bar. It wasn't that far off. It was rather close to where the car was parked. They went in. There was some sort of altercation. She got mad at them, at the guy she was with. And then so she stormed out, and nobody saw her again. Nobody knew what happened. Apparently, on the walk back to the truck, she slipped into some puddle, or icy thing. We all do this, you think it's just going to be snow, and and probably fell over, and she was wearing tight jeans, and as a result, she didn't make it much further than that. She died of exposure. She froze to death by the side of the road, and her body was found that morning. I woke up that morning next to all my goofy friends, just in a silly mood, and the sheriff was knocking on my door, the sheriff, and my grandma came, and she said, honey, you gotta come upstairs. We have some bad news. And they told me what they had to tell. And that's kind of the whole story. So like I said, there's a lot of different spins on what happened, like to what extent it was somewhat suicidal, to what extent it was a result of addiction, to what extent it was simply a bad accident that happened to someone who was living a risky life. She had parked in parking lots at like national forests and just slept in the back of her truck. Like, she was engaging in activities that sooner or later could be fatal or result in other negative consequences. So I choose not to color it as little as possible with what I want it to be. And so I see it as a tragic accident. The significance of the 18th birthday is kind of interesting to me. I was her last child, and of course, a lot of us conceive of maybe 16, 18, 21, but often 18 is the age when someone is now an adult or a man, or is the parent's responsibility is concluded. And so for me, that was a real irony. A lot of things in my life happen in this way, where the timing of it is almost like mockingly ironic. Things happen to me on holidays.
Now I have another reason to hate Christmas.
Okay, what are you talking about?
The worst thing that ever happened to me was on Christmas.
Now I've made this video and it explains this, but I don't celebrate my birthday because it's the day that my mother died. And I don't like to explain it every time on the day my mother died, that this is why I don't want to do the birthday thing. Like, maybe I'm just being a dick with that, but maybe I'm being a dick by celebrating on the day that my mother died. So hopefully that makes sense. But this expands to other holidays. I've been dumped on a Valentine's Day quite a bit. I've had some pretty terrifying Halloweens. And I think that most of us have had the experience that Christmas kind of blows and isn't what you expect, and is often disappointing. When we start talking about time, which is going to happen soon, I will show you what I've done with holidays, because I don't like them. I think that you should celebrate every day. I think that people should be special whenever you feel like they're special, and you should give gifts if that's a thing that you do, and that to whatever extent it becomes mandatory for me to give you a card, that has stripped the meaning and purpose of the card itself. It's not special because I was scripted to do this for you. It was work.
You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch.
There would be a lot to talk about if I were to really go into depth on any of this, but I just wanted this basic kind of summary. One of the few things I've published as an author was writing about this moment the day of, when I woke up, when I heard the news. I still thought I was going to go off and play with my friends. I had no idea how big this was going to hit me. I had never experienced anything like this. So, and it didn't happen immediately. I've said this before too, like in moments of crisis, I don't emotionally react right away. In fact, it was maybe 4 hours later that I even started crying. I just, things don't really make all the connections right away. I'm kind of a dummy, but it's sort of a superpower too, because in crisis situations, I'm just kind of normal until afterward, then I'm a fit. But when it did hit me, I went off on a walk in the snow, the Kim Williams Trail, I believe, by the University of Montana. This is what I wrote about in this anthology called Bear the Pall. You know, it's not huge or anything, but it was a published book that I was involved in, and it was a story about this moment and how it influenced me for the rest of my life, how it was formative for me, that just walking through that snow and just the sun became enormous. I can't explain this, but it's like the sun like took over the entire sky and it just filled me up, and I felt like that was her just kind of talking to me, and then I started crying, and I didn't stop for weeks and weeks, and they pulled me out of school. And I think I do want to talk a little bit about the school situation, because I think that's a constructive message. But one of the main things that I got out of that is that I had recalled a conversation that she and I had had while driving, where she was just remarking how amazing songwriters are, how Elton John or whatever, the genius of like lyrics and musicianship and arrangement all being kind of brought into this singular moment that impacts so many people in such a significant way. And as a person who at the time was obsessed with Ayn Rand, and I don't believe I had read my first Ken Wilber book, but perhaps somewhere around there is right when I started reading Ken Wilber and kind of shifted away from the Rand nonsense. I don't want to say nonsense. That's mean. Rand's cool. Chill out. But as, you know, an idealistic young man with stars in his eyes, I said, you know what? This is how I'm going to take this. You know, this is how I'm going to move forward. I'm going to be a songwriter. Because I had been playing guitar for a while. I'd been singing with James. I'd been writing songs and not really taking myself very seriously, but I just, it locked in, and I said, this is me. I'm a songwriter. I'm an artist. And now we're getting into Artists Anonymous. That went on for about 20 years. I still plan to write songs. I plan to record them and put them here, as opposed to some of my other channels where I've done music. I don't see ever being in bands again. It was rather toxic. Maybe because of me, but you know, that doesn't make it a good idea to keep doing it. I don't know if that seemed cohesive as a moment, but just on that walk, I made that decision, and that carried me forward for quite a while. And that's what I wrote about in Bear the Pall, which was compiled by my friend Sally. And I wanted to note too, so my senior year of high school, I missed a good month or maybe probably about a month of school, just as I grieved, and I didn't really, nobody asked me. It was just kind of a given, like, we'll take some time off school and you come back when you're ready. When I went back, I feel like the teachers or someone in the school, nobody explained this to me, but I believe that the students were all kind of prepped by the faculty to treat me gingerly, to be kind to me, I'm sure they leveled with the students in my classes about what had happened and like what to expect. And I didn't really quite put that together, but I felt like my senior year of high school, I was rather popular. And I really wore that, you know. It was like a feather in my cap. I felt like I was kind of the king of the world. It's funny when terrible, terrible things happen to me, I tend to go into a really positive place. I tend to take it in a really positive direction, and I tend to get a lot of energy and self-esteem. And one of the things that happened was I got pretty quickly into my first relationship, and I to this day wouldn't know whether this person was coming at me because of this tragedy, like she was interested in like a dark person or someone with like a kind of depth to him like that, or maybe she felt sympathetic towards me at first. But the attraction happened very quickly, and it seemed to be there prior. We were the two that were making eyes at each other across the band room. And I remember the band teacher even commented about how like people make eyes with one another across the band room and then they get married someday. And I definitely walked away with that one. And I thought that was going to be the case with her and I. But when we start talking about sort of codependency, it would be pretty clear that my energy towards my mother was redirected towards this person. And one of the things that has been lurking in my shadow through my entire adult life is splitting, this behavior. I'm using it in a sort of pop psychology sense because I don't have a terribly deep understanding of the mechanics of it. I only know what it looks like in practice. But I recognized that my mother did this splitting. She would bring a boyfriend home, and her existing boyfriend would come and challenge that, and she would go and physically fight him off and scream at him, and then he would leave sad, and then she would go to bed with this new boyfriend. But I witnessed her doing that behavior, and I think that on some level, every man is looking for something about their mother, whether that's a sense of comfort, like that kind of attachment, or an attempt to fix or repair the thing that they saw as wrong with them, which I think is more my case. I attract into my life people who are beautiful and wonderful and giving and free of conflict, but little by little, these tendencies creep out of the woodwork towards mood swings, dishonesty, combativeness, and a desire to harm me with jealousy deliberately because it gratifies them sexually or romantically, very much like Twilight. So I've been an Edward many times in my life. I had a partner, Poupette, who we got into a relationship, and then she cheated on me with a person that I knew, and so I wrote her off. But over the course of a year, we worked together. We collaborated on a film, and I was able to compartmentalize. I'm very good at that, and we had a great time working on the film together. And after we had our big discussion, I was ready to move forward with my life and not consider her in that way anymore. But I did consider her a friend, and I did understand that this is not directed at me. It's a pathological romantic thing that is caused by abuse and trauma early in life, and a pattern that persists throughout life. It's almost like a kind of addiction. In pop psychology, it's often called sex addiction, which I don't think is a very good term for it. I also don't think narcissism is a good term for it at all. It only applies to relationships. So these people don't do this with other people, only their partner, whatever that means. And so over the course of that year, Poupette and I became close again. We became close friends. And then at a certain point, it became flirtatious. And then we started dating again. And then she cheated on me with a guy in my band. And, so that time I was serious and I didn't date her again. But that's just one example of how I'm attracting that into my life unknowingly. These people struggle, splitters, people who split, struggle. They don't have the same kind of sense of identity that I have. It's not solid and it's not permanent. They come to me as a projection of what I want. They are perfect to me. And they see me as perfect. But over time, as they actually get to know me, as actual intimacy is developed, it becomes impossible to sustain that illusory identity. And so what they do, it seems really weird to me, but I'm certain of this, they flip a switch, they split. And they suddenly they become the opposite of the perfect person for me. They become a malevolent monster. And I become a toxic, terrible, pathetic, hopeless loser. And I will grieve for a very long time over those relationships, because when I say that I love someone forever, I live that. And I do, at this time, love these people, all of them. But they don't. They jump into another thing, they rebound into another thing, and that allows them to block out whatever positive feelings they have towards me and redirect them to someone for whom those feelings are inappropriate. So that's a good prequel, let's say. And let me just say right now, I'm not looking for sympathy. This happened a long time ago. I'm completely resolved on it to the point where I can tell the world the basic facts of the matter. It's a very sad thing. It's a very tragic thing, but it's not like I'm reaching out for help or anything like that. It's a basis. It's a thing that I'm sharing with you and trying to be vulnerable about.